All right, let's talk about World War II. Not as a list of dates or battles, but as a chain reaction of decisions, fears, economic pressure, and ambition that slowly pulled the entire world into catastrophe. World War II did not begin with a single gunshot or one villain waking up and choosing chaos.
Grew out of unresolved problems left behind by World War I. After 1918, Europe was exhausted, broke, and politically unstable. Empires had collapsed, borders were redrawn, and millions of veterans returned home to economies that couldn't absorb them. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany harshly, not just emotionally, but economically. Massive reparations, territorial losses,
and military restrictions crippled the German state and humiliated its population. That humiliation mattered. Germany experienced hyperinflation in the early 1920s, so extreme that money became almost meaningless. Workers were paid twice a day because prices rose by the hour. Savings vanished. The middle class collapsed. When the Great Depression hit in 1929, Germany
Was already fragile. Unemployment exploded. Democracy looked weak and ineffective. This is the environment where extremist ideas thrive. Adolf Hitler didn't rise because Germans were uniquely evil. He rose because he offered simple answers to complex pain. He blamed minorities, promised economic revival, rejected Versailles, and projected strength. By 1933, he became chancellor, and within months, democracy was dismantled. Germany was transformed into a totalitarian state built around militarism, nationalism, and racial ideology. At the same time, similar pressures were playing out elsewhere. In Italy, Benito Mussolini had already established a fascist regime. In Japan, rapid industrialization had created an economy dependent on imported resources like oil, rubber,
and iron. Japan lacked colonies rich in raw materials, and global trade barriers during the Depression made things worse. Military leaders concluded that survival required expansion. So by the mid-1930s, three major powers, Germany, Italy, and Japan, were all pushing outward, driven by a mix of economic need, ideology, and strategic insecurity. The international system meant
to prevent another global war was weak. The League of Nations had no real enforcement power. Britain and France were traumatized by World War I and desperate to avoid another conflict. This led to appeasement, a policy rooted not in stupidity, but in fear and exhaustion. Germany tested this weakness repeatedly. First, Hitler rearmed.
Germany violating the treaty. No response. Then he remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936. Still no response. In 1938, he annexed Austria. Again, nothing. Each success reinforced the belief that the democracies would not fight. The breaking point came with Czechoslovakia. Hitler demanded the Sudetenland, claiming it was about protecting ethnic Germans. Britain and France
agreed at the Munich conference, sacrificing Czechoslovakia in exchange for peace. It bought time, but it also destroyed any remaining illusion that Hitler would stop voluntarily. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. This time, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. Germany's early success shocked the world. Using blitzkrieg tactics, fast-moving tanks,
coordinated air power, and rapid infantry advances, Germany crushed Poland in weeks. Then came Denmark and Norway, securing access to iron ore. In 1940, Germany turned west. The Netherlands, Belgium, and France fell with stunning speed. France, considered Europe's strongest land power, collapsed in 6 weeks. Britain stood alone. The Battle of Britain wasn't just
an air campaign. It was a test of whether modern industrial war could break civilian morale. Germany bombed cities. Britain bombed back. Radar, aircraft production, and logistics mattered as much as courage. Britain survived, not because it was stronger on paper, but because Germany failed to gain air superiority. Unable to invade Britain, Hitler
made a decision that would define the war. He turned east. In June 1941, Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. It was the largest invasion in human history. Hitler believed the Soviet state would collapse quickly. He underestimated Soviet industrial capacity, geographic depth, and willingness to absorb horrific losses. The Eastern Front became a war of annihilation. Entire cities were destroyed. Civilians were starved, executed, or deported. Battles like Stalingrad and Kursk were not just military engagements. They were industrial meat grinders. Millions died. The Soviet Union lost more people than any other country in the war. While Europe burned, the war expanded globally.
In Asia, Japan had already invaded China in 1937, committing atrocities like the Nanjing Massacre. Japan's war effort depended heavily on imported oil, much of it from the United States. When Japan occupied French Indochina, the U.S. responded with oil embargoes. From Japan's perspective, this was economic strangulation. Japanese leaders faced a choice: withdraw
and accept strategic weakness, or strike first to secure resources in Southeast Asia. They chose war. On December 7, 1941, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. The goal was to neutralize the U.S. Pacific Fleet long enough to seize resource-rich territories. The attack succeeded tactically, but failed strategically. It unified American public opinion overnight. The United
States entered the war with enormous industrial capacity. This changed everything. American factories were converted to wartime production at an unprecedented scale. Ships, planes, tanks, ammunition produced faster than the Axis could destroy them. The U.S. didn't just fight, it supplied its allies. War became a contest of logistics as much as bravery. In the Pacific, the war was brutal and unforgiving. Island-hopping campaigns like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa were fought inch by inch. Japanese military culture emphasized surrender as dishonor, leading to fanatical resistance and devastating casualties on both sides. In Europe, the tide began to turn. The Soviet victory at Stalingrad in 1943 marked the beginning of Germany's retreat in the East. In North Africa, Allied forces defeated German and Italian troops. Then came Italy itself. Mussolini was overthrown, though fighting continued. The decisive moment in Western Europe came on June 6, 1944, D-Day. The Allied invasion of Normandy was a massive gamble. Thousands died in the first hours. But once a foothold was established, Allied industrial and manpower advantages became overwhelming. Germany was now fighting on two fronts, losing both. Inside Germany, cities were being reduced to rubble by strategic bombing. Fuel shortages crippled mobility. Trained pilots and soldiers couldn't be replaced. Hitler's command style grew increasingly detached from reality. He issued orders based on ideology rather than conditions on the ground. By early 1945, Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin from the east. Western allies advanced from the west. Germany was collapsing. In April 1945, Hitler committed suicide. Germany surrendered shortly after. But the war was not over. In the Pacific, Japan continued to resist. Despite devastating firebombing campaigns and naval defeat, Japanese leadership refused unconditional surrender. The planned invasion of Japan was expected to cause massive casualties on both sides. In August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The destruction was immediate and unprecedented. Combined with Soviet entry into the war against Japan, this forced surrender, World War II was over. The human cost was staggering. Over 60 million dead, entire cities erased. The Holocaust resulted in the systematic murder of 6 million Jews, alongside millions of others targeted for extermination. This was not collateral damage. It was industrialized genocide. Economically, the war reshaped the world. Europe was devastated. Infrastructure lay in ruins. The United States emerged as the dominant economic power, largely untouched at home. The Soviet Union, despite immense losses, emerged as a superpower. This set the stage for the Cold War. Institutions like the United Nations, the IMF, and the World Bank were created to prevent another global collapse.
The Marshall Plan rebuilt Western Europe, not purely out of generosity, but to stabilize markets and prevent political extremism. World War II wasn't just a military conflict. It was a turning point in how states mobilize economies, control populations, and justify power. It accelerated technological change, expanded government authority, and permanently altered international relations. The war showed that economic collapse fuels extremism, that unchecked power corrodes decision-making, that industrial capacity can determine victory as much as ideology. And maybe most importantly, it showed that global systems are fragile. When trust collapses, when institutions fail, and when fear dominates politics, destruction follows. World War II wasn't inevitable.